Welcome back to Global Voices, the podcast that explore the world through language and culture.
I want to start today with a little bit of an ego check. I want you to take a second, actually take a full minute, and just scan through your mental resume.
Okay.
I'm looking for the absolute most impressive, intellectually difficult, mind-bending achievement of your entire life. The thing where, if you were at a dinner party and someone asked, what is the hardest thing you've ever done with your brain? This is the story you tell.
It's an interesting exercise. I think for most people, the mind immediately jumps to the credentials, the tangible stuff.
Exactly. You think about passing the bar exam, or maybe defending a PhD dissertation, or maybe it was just figuring out how to code a complex app from scratch, or honestly, maybe it was just navigating a really toxic relationship without losing your mind. We all have that one mountain we climbed where we go, okay, that was hard work.
Right. We associate impressive with effort. We value the things that kept us up at night, the things we had to consciously struggle through.
Precisely. But here is the hook for today's deep dive. And honestly, it is a bit of a reality check. The stack of research we're looking at today argues that we are all completely wrong about what constitutes our greatest intellectual feat.
Completely wrong.
It argues that the single most complex, mathematically improbable, and biologically demanding task you have ever achieved, you probably don't even remember doing it.
You almost certainly don't, because you were likely wearing a diaper at the time.
We are talking, of course, about first language acquisition, or what the linguists refer to as L1.
L1. It is the foundational event of human cognition. And it's funny you mentioned the ego check, because looking at L1 is the ultimate way to humble yourself.
How so?
We tend to think of language as just something that happens. You're a kid, you hear people talk, you start talking. Big deal.
That was my reaction when I first looked at the topic sheet. I thought, okay, learning to talk, everyone does it. How complex can it be? But as I started reading through these sources, specifically the breakdown of what is actually happening inside an infant's brain during this process, I realized I had totally underestimated the scale of this operation.
Most people do. We suffer from what the source material calls the mashed pea paradox.
The mashed pea paradox. I love this visual. Break this down for us, because it really sets the stage for the contrast we're exploring.
Well, picture a human infant, let's say a toddler, around 18 months old. If you look at them purely from a physical motor skills perspective, they are a disaster.
They really are. They're like tiny drunk anarchists.
They are. They have terrible motor control. They can't walk in a straight line without toppling over. They have zero impulse control.
None.
If you put a bowl of mashed peas in front of them, statistically speaking, 80% of that food is going to end up in their hair, on the floor, or smeared on the wall.
At least 80%.
They can't even coordinate a spoon to their mouth reliably.
Right. Gravity is still a major adversary for them. They're struggling with basic physics.
Exactly. And yet, and this is the paradox, while they are failing to navigate a spoon, that same chaotic little brain is effortlessly mastering a system of communication so complex that our best supercomputers, with all our AI advancement, still struggle to replicate it perfectly.
When you put it that way, the contrast is it's stark, because language isn't just naming things, right? I think that's the big misconception.
Not at all.
We think, the baby points at the dog and says, dog, he learned a word.
That's the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah.
That's just vocabulary.
Yeah.
Underneath the surface, that toddler is doing high-level computation. They're absorbing phonetics, distinguishing the subtle sound differences between a P and a B in milliseconds.
Wow.
They are internalizing syntax, the invisible rules of word order. They are figuring out morphology, how to conjugate verbs to indicate time.
Like past tense, future tense.
All of it. And they are doing all of this without a textbook, without a teacher, and without any conscious effort.
That's the part that blows my mind, the no conscious effort part. Because if I try to learn a language now, say I decide I want to learn German or Mandarin, it is nothing but conscious effort.
Not a grind.
It is painful. It is hours of flashcards and feeling stupid and getting things wrong over and over again.
Yes.
So what is the difference? Why is the baby who can't eat peas without making a mess a genius at this, but the adult with the college degree struggles so much?
That is the central question of this deep dive. And the sources suggest the answer requires a total shift in perspective.
Yeah.
We have to stop looking at first language acquisition as a subject.
Meaning it's not like, history or math, something you sit down and learn.
Exactly. It's not a body of knowledge you acquire through study. It is a biological event.
A biological event. Okay, let's unpack that. Because when I think of a biological event, I think of like growing a tooth or hitting puberty. It just happens. You don't study for it.
That is actually a very apt comparison. The source material emphasizes that L1 acquisition is an organic, subconscious process. It is completely distinct from classroom learning.
So there's no curriculum?
None. When a child learns their first language, they aren't studying. They are developing. It's much closer to the way a spider learns to spin a web or a bird learns to fly than it is to you or me learning how to use Excel.
So a spider doesn't take Web Design 101.
Right.
It just has the capacity to do it, and the environment triggers that capacity.
Exactly. The blueprint is there. The spider doesn't need to understand the tensile strength of silk. It just spins. A child doesn't need to understand the definition of a preposition. They just use it flawlessly.
But if this is a biological event, like growing a tooth, well, biological events usually have a schedule.
A timeline.
Teeth come in at a certain age, puberty happens at a certain age, and if you miss that window, things get weird. Does language have a deadline?
It does. And this brings us to one of the most crucial and frankly somewhat intimidating concepts in the literature, the critical period.
The critical period. This sounds intense, like a countdown clock ticking in the background of every nursery.
In a way, it is. The source defines this as a biological window, typically starting at birth and slowly closing around puberty.
Okay, so roughly birth to age 12 or 13, that's the golden window for language.
That's the prime time. And during this specific window, the source describes the brain as being hyper-reactive to language input.
Hyper-reactive. I like that term. It sounds like the brain is just hungry for it.
It is. Think of the brain during this period as a super absorbent sponge. But not just any sponge. It's a smart sponge that knows how to organize everything it absorbs.
Or the other analogy you mentioned from the text, which I thought was great, was wet cement.
Yes, wet cement.
Explain that one.
When the cement is wet, you can mold it. You can press a shape into it with almost zero resistance. That is the infant brain. It possesses a level of plasticity that allows for the effortless absorption of grammar rules and, crucially, native-level phonetics.
The accent.
The accent, exactly. This is why a 6-year-old can move to a new country, say, from Tokyo to New York, and pick up the local accent perfectly within a year.
Right. They won't just speak English. They'll speak New York English. They'll get all the nuances of the vowels, the intonation.
Everything, because their auditory cortex is still plastic enough to tune itself to those specific frequencies. But their parents, they might study English for 10 years. They might master the grammar, get a huge vocabulary.
But they'll almost always have an accent.
They will likely retain their native accent for the rest of their lives.
Because the cement has dried.
The cement has set. The brain loses that extreme plasticity. It's not that you can't learn, but the biological pathway has changed. You are now using a hammer and chisel on dried concrete, whereas the child was just molding wet clay.
That plasticity is wild. But the sources mention something even darker about this critical period. It's not just about accents, is it? There is a specific warning about what happens if you miss the window entirely.
Yes, the stakes section of research. And this is based on some really tragic but scientifically invaluable case studies of feral children, or children, raised in extreme isolation.
The kinds of cases you hope never to see.
Exactly. And the text states that if a child is not exposed to language, any language spoken or signed, during this window, if they miss the boat, so to speak, achieving full fluency later becomes significantly harder, and in some aspects, impossible.
And when they say impossible, they don't just mean you'll have an accent. They mean the actual grammatical structure, the deep understanding of how language works might never fully form.
Correct. Things like complex syntax, embedding clauses, understanding passive voice, those things might remain forever out of reach. It frames language learning not as a hobby you can pick up whenever you have free time, but as a use it or lose it biological necessity.
So the brain basically expects it.
It expects language during that window. If it doesn't get it, it reallocates those resources.
It reallocates the resources. What does that mean?
The brain is efficient. It hates unused real estate. So if the neurons in the auditory cortex and Broca's area aren't being used for language processing, the brain might say, okay, we'll use this space for enhanced visual processing instead, or for spatial reasoning. And once that switch is made, you can't really switch it back.
That is slightly terrifying, but also fascinating. it really reinforces that idea of the biological event. We are timed to learn this. We are pre-programmed with a deployment schedule.
We are. And what's even more convincing evidence for this biological timing is that it doesn't seem to matter which language you are learning. The roadmap is exactly the same.
This is the universal roadmap section of our Deep Dive. And I found this part so cool because culturally we are all so different, right?
Completely.
A kid growing up in Tokyo has a totally different life than a kid in Nairobi or a kid in New York. Different food, different parenting styles, different sounds in their environment.
Culturally, yes, the environments are worlds apart. But biologically, the internal program is the same. The source explicitly states, regardless of whether a child is learning Swahili, Mandarin, or English, they all pass through the same developmental milestones in the same order.
That is a bold statement. So you're saying a baby in Beijing and a baby in Boston are basically running the exact same software update schedule.
That is a perfect way to put it. It's a universal sequence. And the source walks us through this step by step. It starts very early, around 2 to 4 months, with cooing.
Cooing? This is the cute stuff, the little oohs and ahs.
It is. These are vowel-like sounds, and it might just sound like happy noise to us, but this is the first boot-up sequence. They're testing the vocal cords, experimenting with sound production. They're discovering they have a voice.
But why vowels? Why is it always ooh and not coo or puh? Isn't there a reason for that?
There is. It's anatomy. Vowels are the path of least resistance. To make a vowel sound, you just open your mouth and let air pass through the vibrating vocal cords. You don't need to manipulate your tongue or lips to block the air. It's the easiest, most fundamental sound a human can make.
So they're just revving the engine, checking if the speakers work before they try to do anything complicated.
Exactly. But then around 6 months, we hit stage 2, babbling.
Ba ba ba.
Exactly. This is a major shift. Now we get repeated syllables, the classic ba 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 or ma ma ma.
Right. And parents always freak out here because they think the kid is saying mama or dada.
I hate to be the bearer of bad news to any new parents listening, but usually at 6 months, they aren't naming you. They are practicing rhythm.
Rhythm, what do you mean by that?
Yes. Think about what the consonant requires. To say bah, you have to close your lips, build up air pressure, and then release it explosively while vibrating your cords. That is a complex motor skill.
A lot of moving parts.
Babbling is the gym workout for the mouth. They are practicing the consonant vowel structure that makes up the syllables in almost all human speech. Da 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 ma ma ma.
Yeah.
It's the linguistic equivalent of doing push-ups.
And there was one detail in the source here that completely floored me. It had to do with deaf infants.
Oh, yes. This is one of the strongest proofs for the biological argument. It's incredible.
Because if language is just about mimicking what you hear, a deaf baby wouldn't babble, right? They can't hear the ba 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 from their parents.
That would be the logical assumption. That was the old behaviorist theory. But the research shows that deaf infants who are exposed to sign language from birth—
From deaf parents, for instance.
Yes, from deaf parents who sign— those babies will babble with their hands.
With their hands.
Around the same age, 6 months, they start making repetitive, rhythmic hand movements that aren't yet meaningful signs, but they have the form and rhythm of signing. They are syllabifying with their hands. They're practicing the building blocks of sign language, just like a hearing baby practices the building blocks of speech.
That is incredible. So the brain says it is time to practice the rhythm of language, and it uses whatever output device is available, mouth or hands.
Exactly. The drive is internal, not external. It's a biological imperative. The urge to babble is hardwired.
Okay, so we've got cooing, then babbling. We've practiced the scales. When do we get to actual meaning? When do words start to appear?
That happens around the 12-month mark, the one-word stage.
The one-word stage. This feels like the biggest leap so far. From noise to a word with meaning.
It is a massive cognitive leap. The source notes that this isn't just saying a sound, it is using single nouns to represent complex ideas.
Can you give me an example of that? Because milk just sounds like milk. It doesn't sound very complex on the surface.
To us, yes. But linguists call these holophrases. The idea is that the single word is functioning as an entire sentence. When a 1-year-old looks at you, points at the fridge and says milk, they aren't just identifying the white liquid.
Right. They're not just labeling it.
No, they are typically communicating a whole scenario.
Like what?
Depending on the tone and context, milk could mean I am hungry and I want that specific bottle right now. Or if they drop a bottle and it spills and they point and say milk, it means I made a mistake, please pick it up.
Or, uh-oh, milk is on the floor.
Exactly. Or if they see a cow in a picture book, milk means that is the source of the liquid I like.
That is so true. It's like a zip file, one word, but when you click it, there's a whole paragraph of demands and observations inside.
Exactly. They're compressing complex thoughts into the limited linguistic tools they have available. They have the thought, they just don't have the bandwidth to output the full sentence yet.
Which is amazing. And this efficiency continues into the next stage, right? Around 2 years old?
Yes. Around 18 months to 2 years, we get telegraphic speech.
Telegraphic speech. I love this term because it sounds so old school, like sending a telegram. Arriving Tuesday. Stop.
That is exactly why linguists use the term. In a telegram, you paid by the word, so you cut out all the fluff.
Yeah.
You kept only the essentials. Toddlers do the same thing. They are budget-conscious speakers.
So instead of, I would like some juice, please, you get,
Want juice, or doggy bark, or me go out.
it's ruthless editing. They're cutting out all the little words.
It is, but look at what is preserved. The nouns and the verbs, the content words. And look at what is cut. The function words, the is, the a, the prepositions.
But the meaning is clear. You know exactly what want juice means.
The meaning is crystal clear, and crucially, the syntax is usually correct for their language. They don't say juice want. They understand the structure, subject, verb, object. They just don't have the processing power or memory for the little connecting words yet.
So we have this universal roadmap, cooing, babbling, one word, telegraphic. And every single human being listening to this went through that exact list. It really drives home that this is programmed into us.
It is. But here's where it gets really interesting and maybe a little counterintuitive for us as adults. We know the timeline, but how is the learning actually happening? Because as we established, you can't sit a 2-year-old down and teach them grammar rules.
Right. You can't teach a toddler. I mean, have you ever tried to explain anything abstract to a toddler? They just look at you like you're an alien or they walk away.
Exactly. And that's why the distinction between acquisition and study is so vital. The source emphasizes that children do not learn rules consciously. They don't know that the past tense usually ends in the said. They don't know what a preposition is. They've never heard of a split infinitive.
So how do they get it right? If they don't know the rules, how do they follow them?
Subconscious patterns. Their brain is a statistical analysis machine. They internalize the patterns solely through massive exposure. They are data crunchers. They hear thousands and thousands of sentences, and their brains, below the level of consciousness, are statistically analyzing what sounds right.
But they don't get it right immediately. And this leads to my favorite part of the source material because it's so relatable. The correction paradox.
This is a classic phenomenon in child development. It's arguably the most frustrating thing about parenting a toddler, linguistically speaking.
I want to role play this for a second because I feel like I see parents doing this in the grocery store all the time. The kid says something wrong and the parent jumps in to be the teacher.
Right. Let's use the famous example from the source, the I-GOAD scenario.
Okay, so I'm the kid. I'm maybe 2.5. I just came back from the playground. And I look at you and say, Daddy, I go to the park.
Now, first off, as a linguist, I'm secretly proud of you.
Why? I said it wrong. It's incorrect.
You said it wrong, but you used excellent logic. You know that walk becomes walked. You know, play becomes played. You figured out the rule to make something past tense. Add, so you apply that rule to go. You created good.
So I'm being a scientist.
You're being a brilliant scientist. You're testing a hypothesis. You're over-regularizing the rule. This error is actually proof that you're learning the system, not just mimicking.
Okay, but as a parent, I don't want you sounding illiterate. So I say, nobody, the word is went. Say, I went.
And as the child, sticking to your internal map, what do you reply? And the parent gets a little frustrated. No, listen to my words. Say, I went.
I got.
I went.
I-G-O-E-D. It's infuriating. Why? Why are they so stubborn? What is happening in their brain?
It's not stubbornness. It's that negative evidence correction simply doesn't work at this stage. The source explains that the child isn't listening to the rule you are explaining. They are following their internal map.
Their internal map.
Yes. Their brain has constructed a system based on the patterns they have observed so far. In their system, past tense equals ed. That is the law. Your single correction is just a drop in the ocean against the tidal wave of data their brain has already processed. They essentially filter out your correction as noise or an anomaly.
So you can't just overwrite their code by telling them they are wrong. It's like trying to edit a single line of code in a massive program without understanding the architecture.
That's a great analogy. You can't. They will only switch to went when their internal system updates itself. And that happens through more exposure.
So I just have to wait. I don't do anything.
You have to keep talking. You model the correct form. You say, oh, you went to the park. That's great. I went to the store today. Eventually they hear, I went, he went, we went. Enough times that the brain's statistical analyzer goes, oh, wait. Go is an exception. It doesn't follow the pattern. Let's create a special file for this one. Update the map.
And then magically, one day they just start saying went without you even noticing the change.
Exactly. And they won't even know why. It will just sound right to them.
That is wild. It really reinforces that we aren't the pilots of this process. We are just the passengers. The brain is driving.
And that idea that the brain is driving, that there is an internal engine, leads us directly to one of the biggest names in this field.
I was waiting for this.
Noam Chomsky.
Chomsky, the heavyweight champion of linguistics. You can't talk about language acquisition without bringing him up. The source uses him to explain why we have this internal map.
Right. Chomsky introduced the theory of universal grammar. The idea is that humans aren't born as blank slates. We are born with a blueprint for language hardwired into the brain. He called this mechanism the language acquisition device, or LAD.
The LAD. It sounds like a gadget you'd buy on late-night TV. Order your language acquisition device today and we'll throw in a second one absolutely free.
It does. But the concept revolutionized how we understand the mind. To understand why it was so revolutionary, you have to understand what people believed before him, the dominant theory at the time.
Which was what?
Behaviorism. B.F. Skinner. The idea was that children are just parrots.
Parrots. Just mimics.
Blank slates. The theory was that a child learns language strictly through mimicry and reward. The child hears mom say, cookie. Child says cookie, the child gets a cookie. Positive reinforcement. Everything you say is just a recording of something you heard.
That sounds intuitive, though. Monkey do. It makes a certain kind of simple sense.
It sounds intuitive until you look at the data. And the source points out the smoking gun that really dismantled the parrot theory.
Which is?
Creativity.
Or what linguists call the poverty of the stimulus.
Okay, poverty of the stimulus. Break that down for me.
It means that the language a child hears, the stimulus, is not rich enough to explain the language they produce. The source notes that children create original sentences they have never, ever heard before.
Like I goed.
I goed is a perfect example. No adult says, I goed. So where did the child hear it? Nowhere. The child didn't mimic that. They created it. They took a rule and applied it to a new situation to generate a new word.
Oh, I see. If they were just parrots, they could only repeat phrases they had actually heard. But because they are building things that don't exist in the input, they must have a machine inside them that builds sentences. Precisely. They aren't playing back a recording. They are using a synthesizer. The LAD is that generator. It's the blueprint that contains the fundamental rules of all human languages, that sentences have subjects and verbs, for instance, and it allows us to take a finite number of words and create an infinite number of novel sentences.
That is a mind-blowing distinction, mimicry versus generation. If I can say a sentence that has literally never been spoken in the history of the universe, like the purple giraffe is knitting a sweater for the moon, it means I have a system for generating language, not just a recording of it.
Exactly. And Chomsky's argument was that this system, this LAD, is innate. It's part of our DNA. We're born with the settings pre-installed. The specific language we're exposed to just flips the switches to the right settings for English or Japanese or Swahili.
So we have this amazing machinery, we have the LAD, we have the biological window, but the source brings up a really important caveat. The machine is powerful, but it doesn't run on air. It needs fuel.
Yes. You can have the best engine in the world, but if you don't put gas in it, it won't run.
And the fuel for the language acquisition device is other people.
Social context, immersion, real human interaction.
I found this section really interesting because it addresses a very modern question. In the age of iPads and YouTube Kids and 24-hour cartoons, the question is, if language is just about input, just about hearing words, could you just park a baby in front of a TV for 10 hours a day and have them learn Japanese?
I feel like a lot of tired parents secretly wish the answer was yes.
They certainly do. Just let the iPad teach them French while I take a nap.
But the answer from the research is a definitive, resounding no. L1 acquisition requires social context.
Why isn't the TV enough? It's speaking perfectly, it has pictures, it repeats things, it seems like the perfect teacher in some ways.
It lacks a critical component that the source calls joint attention.
Define that for us. Joint attention.
Joint attention is the shared experience of two people looking at the same object while communicating about it. Imagine a mother and a baby. The mother looks at a ball. She points to the ball. She looks at the baby to make sure the baby is also looking at the ball. Then she says, ball.
It's a triangle. Me, you, and the object of our attention.
Exactly. And crucially, there is an emotional component. The source states that the emotional bond is the actual fuel for linguistic development. The baby isn't learning the word ball just to categorize the universe like a little scientist. They're learning it to connect with the caregiver.
That makes so much sense. Language is a tool for connection, not just information transfer. The TV doesn't care about you.
Right. The TV doesn't react when you smile at it. It doesn't pause when you look confused. It doesn't hand you the ball when you reach for it. That feedback loop, that emotional dance is what signals to the brain, this sound matters. This sound gets me what I want. Remember this.
So without the human connection, the LED just stays in idle mode. The engine is there, but it never turns over.
Pretty much. There have been famous studies where children were exposed to foreign languages only via TV or radio, and they learned almost nothing. But give them a real human to interact with, even for a short time each week, and the learning explodes. The social context is the key that turns the ignition.
So we have the biological hardware, which is the LED. We have the software update schedule, the universal sequence, and we have the power source, which is social connection. It's a perfect system.
It is. It's a miracle of evolution, really.
Which brings us to the tragedy of the second half of the show.
The tragedy. It sounds dramatic.
The tragedy of high school Spanish class. Because if we are these perfect language learning machines, why is it that when we try to learn a second language in L2 later in life, it is so incredibly hard?
It is the question every adult learner asks themselves in frustration. Why could I learn English perfectly when I was a dumb baby, but I can't learn French now that I'm a smart adult?
Exactly. And the source provides a really helpful data deep dive here, a comparison table between L1 and L2 acquisition. I want to run through these points because I think it validates a lot of the frustration our listeners might feel.
Let's do it. It helps to see the variables laid out side by side.
Okay, first point on the table, effort.
L1, subconscious and effortless. As we said, you do it while struggling to eat mashed peas. You aren't trying, you're just absorbing. L2, conscious and high effort. You have to study, you have to memorize conjugations, you have to memorize pronunciation in the mirror. It is a mental workout.
It's all effort. Okay, second point, speed. Now, this one actually surprised me when I read it.
Yes, this is counterintuitive. We tend to say, oh, children learn so fast, but the source points out that L1 acquisition is actually slow.
How so? It feels fast.
Think about it. A 5-year-old is fluent, sure, but that took 5 years. 5 years of being awake for 12 hours a day, completely surrounded by native speakers, with constant one-on-one tuition from their parents. That is thousands and thousands of hours of immersion.
That's a really good point. If I studied Spanish for 5 years, 12 hours a day, with a private tutor, I'd probably be pretty good too.
You would be incredible. You'd be fluent. But with L2, we usually want speed. We study for 30 minutes a day on an app and get frustrated when we aren't fluent in 6 months. So L2 can be faster in terms of gaining basic communication, but we often compare our casual study habits to a child's total immersion lifestyle.
That's a fair reality check. We are comparing apples to oranges in terms of exposure time. Okay, what about the goal? What's the end game for L1 versus L2?
The goal for L1 is native fluency. It's an absolute standard, perfect accent, perfect grammar, perfect idiom usage. You sound like you belong. The goal for L2 is usually just proficiency or communication.
Right. I don't need to pass for a Parisian when I'm in France. I just need to be able to order a coffee and ask where the bathroom is without offending anyone.
Exactly. And that's okay. We need to adjust our expectations. We are aiming for utility, not perfection. But with our first language, the bar is set at perfection, and we all clear it without even trying.
And finally, and this feels like the biggest one for me, motivation.
Huge. For L1, the motivation is survival and connection. If you don't learn to speak, you can't tell your mom you're hungry. You can't tell her you're hurt. You can't form bonds or play with the other kids. The stakes are existential.
Right. It's sink or swim. Learn to communicate or be left behind.
Whereas for L2, what is the motivation for most adults?
Usually it's, I think Italian sounds pretty, or it would be nice for my resume, or I want to travel there someday.
Exactly. It's professional or personal interest. Those are nice goals, but they aren't survival. Your brain knows the difference. It knows it doesn't need Italian to survive the day. So the urgency, the adrenaline that drives deep, rapid learning just isn't there.
So combine the lower stakes with the fact that the critical period window has closed and the brain isn't as plastic, and you have the recipe for the struggle we all feel.
Exactly. The machinery has changed and the fuel has changed. We are trying to do a biological job with an academic tool set. We are trying to use logic and memory to learn something that was originally learned through instinct and immersion.
Man, that is a lot to process, but it also makes me feel a lot better about my terrible French accent.
It should. You are fighting biology. The fact that any of us can learn a second language at all as adults is actually deeply impressive. It's just a different kind of achievement.
So let's bring this all home. We've gone from the cooing baby to the frustrated adult student. We've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive.
We have. We've really seen that language isn't just a skill we learn, like riding a bike. It's a defining feature of our biology. It's the software that comes preloaded on the human hardware.
We tracked that universal roadmap, cooing the simple vowels, babbling the rhythm of speech, using one-word zip files, and then sending those two-word telegrams. It's the same script for everyone on Earth, which is just incredible to think about.
We looked at Chomsky's language acquisition device and how our brains are literally hardwired to generate new sentences, proving we are creative communicators, not just parrots.
And we learned that you can't just correct a child into fluency, that whole I God paradox. They have to update their own internal map through exposure.
Yeah.
That's a powerful lesson in patience for any parent.
And we realized that without social connection, without that emotional bond, none of this works. We aren't robots downloading a data file. We're social animals learning to connect.
Which is a beautiful thing to remember. Language is for connection. It's not just for transferring data. It's for building relationships, for community.
Precisely.
So as we wrap up, I want to leave you, our listener, with a final thought. We spend a lot of time talking about that internal map, how the child says, I goed, until eventually, through observation and immersion, they figure out, I went. They learn their most complex skill without ever successfully being corrected by a teacher.
Right. They did it by listening and integrating.
They did it by paying attention. They did it by being messy and making mistakes.
Thousands of mistakes.
So here is the question. If that is how our brains are designed to learn our most difficult skill, what does that suggest about how we should approach learning new things as adults? We are often so paralyzed by the fear of being wrong. We want to read the whole manual before we turn on the machine. We want to know all the rules before we play the game.
We want to be perfect before we even start.
Exactly. But the baby doesn't care about being perfect. The baby cares about being understood. Maybe we need less correction, less stress about the rules, and a little more of that mashed pea style immersion.
Get messy with it.
Just get messy with it. Babble a little, make some mistakes, say I goed a few times, and trust that your brain will eventually update the map as you go.
I couldn't agree more. Sometimes you just have to babble before you can speak. And maybe the goal shouldn't always be perfection, but just connection.
I love that. A perfect thought to end on. Thanks for diving in with us. We'll see you next time.